Alright, today I've got kind of a follow-up to my first head drawing tutorial, and I really just wanted to kind of quickly go through the bases again. So you'll see I'm going to draw a head here, but the real purpose of this video is going to just be to show you how I draw a head from a 3/4 view and from a side view. But let me go ahead and draw this out, and it's sped up a little bit, but you'll notice I'm using some of the same measurements. The eye widths, for example, on the head, if you remember, the head is 5 eyes wide. So you have about the space of an eye in between each eye, and so on. And you'll see I've got guidelines for the nose that I'm fleshing in right now. Drew a rough hairline about a quarter way from the top of the skull. Same with the mouth from the bottom. And I'm going to just fill these in real quick. I've got my head drawn here, and the next head that I'll draw is going to be a 3/4 view. And so all of these measurements that I've taken from my front view, I'm going to go ahead and just reuse them for the 3/4 view. You could redraw them, of course, as well. And just like a front view wall, I like to start with the circle. The circle kind of defines our skull's shape. And then I'll draw just some real light lines of where the chin might be. And kind of like the front where you've got a square jaw, when you draw a 3/4 view, you're only going to see the square jaw on one side of the head, and that's the side of the head facing the viewer. And on the other side, you can just kind of have a straight or somewhat sloping line up to the cheekbone. And I'll draw the same guidelines through the center of the head for the eyes. Kind of mark some lines where the mouth and nose would be. And two, I mentioned the cheekbone. On the side that you see the chin, or I guess the jaw, you're going to see that cheekbone swoop down from where the cheek is up near the ear down to the chin. And you can see I'll use those same measurements. Even the eyes are kind of similar. They're going to be a little bit different, and this kind of takes some practice. Look at some reference photos, look at drawings, try it out. You're not going to have a full eye width between eyes when you're from a side view, just because of the perspective of things. And you're not going to have very much space between the eye, in this case on the left side of the head drawing, or his right eye, and the side of the head. There's not going to be a full eye width or a half eye width or anything like that, because again, the head is turned, and so you're only going to see a portion of it. And go ahead and kind of pay attention to how I do some of the details here. And I'm not going to go into depth into the details in this video, but it's a good opportunity, especially if you kind of feel like you're comfortable drawing the head. Look at how I draw things like the eyes or the nose or the mouth. And in the case of this 3/4 view, the mouth is really just a simple line with kind of some heavier strokes or circles or dots at the end. And really, you can kind of get away with that a lot of times. You don't get carried away with drawing what you think a mouth looks like. And again, that's something that comes with practice, but you can actually just draw lines that show how the mouth might be shaped or turned. And now for the side view, it's a little bit different, and I tend to have to redraw the skull for this one, but again, you start with a nice circle for the skull. And again, like the 3/4 view, you're going to draw part of the jaw. Okay. And then the profile of the nose is kind of important. I like to get that out of the way early so that I know what I'm working with, and it helps me make sure that I've got my measurements correct. And also with this, kind of where that circle cuts down and swoops in through where the nose is, that tends to line up with just about where the eye is actually. And I've gone ahead and kind of extended that line down to draw where the cheekbone might be indented. And then one thing that can be tricky with side views is the proportion of the skull and the shape and size of it compared to the head. And I think I did a reasonable job on this one, but the general warning I'll give is when drawing a head from the side, people tend to draw the skull much smaller than it actually is. So be careful to not make it too small. In fact, you could always just draw it bigger, when you draw these light guidelines, and then if it just looks way too big, you can scale it back down. And I'm just going to darken these lines in, and I'm almost done with the video for today. It's just kind of a nice brief follow-up to the last head drawing video. But once you've got the nice guidelines in, it's always really kind of satisfying to go in and darken things up and watch that final drawing take shape. And you'll notice I'm kind of selective on where I draw dark lines, what I finish and what I leave unfinished. And that too can be an important thing to take note of when you're drawing. Some lines don't necessarily need to connect. The human brain just kind of knows that maybe it should connect, or it can kind of see what's going on there. And so not only can you use that to your advantage, but sometimes it's just a nice technique. It kind of adds some realism or some interest to your drawings. So go ahead and practice drawing your head some more, and in the next tutorial we'll talk about some of the more specifics, drawing noses, mouths, and eyes. And as I finish this up, I just want to add that if you have any comments, please feel free to leave them here in the comments section, or if you're on my website, leave me a comment there. And you can also request future topics for videos or anything like that. Thanks for watching.